This is Writers Drinking Alcoholic Eggnog, which is a podcast based on writers sitting around drinking alcoholic eggnog and talking about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process.
Hey, at least it's November already.
It is November. We are not censoring ourselves. It's going to be PG-13, and you should be drinking some of this eggnog. Your hosts today are Chaz Brenchley, John Schmidt, David Welsh, and me, Jeannie Warner. I said everybody's name right with this much eggnog. This is episode 26, Death by Cliche, Part 2. This is because last week I was on a rant and a tear, and I had not yet stood on enough of my little soapbox to say, I'm sick and tired of some of the cliches, the romantic cliches that are used to describe women, girls, etc. But we realized we had a lot more to say.
I was just going to say, you're not allowed to start it again.
I'm not starting again. This is the eggnog talking.
This is Writers Drinking Coffee, a podcast about sexual
today
cliches.
This is Writers Drinking Eggnog. Oh. And today we're going to talk about adjectives and adverbs in particular.
And verbs.
And verbs.
I like verbs.
And nouns. Let's round it out with nouns.
And verbally. Let's talk about words.
Okay.
Parts
Let's
of
talk
speech.
about words, because cliches, like all writing, it's a bit of a cliche, but cliches are made of words. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is also true that most cliches derive initially from accuracy, basically. They are generally good ways to describe something, which is why they get repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated. But they get to the point of meaninglessness, which is not a thing you want in your writing.
No.
And I mean, because I am me, I was thinking about this before I approached the microphone. I'm thinking, you know what's going to happen, Chaz? Someone's going to ask you for an example, and your mind will go blank, and you'll be completely unable to think of any cliche at all. And then I thought, a horrid shriek rent the air. I turned to stone. My marrow froze in my bones. And and it comes down passing that all the way through. The first thing is the verb. A horrid shriek rent the air. Nobody rends anything anymore, except in that kind of context and one other, because there always has to be one counterexample. I've been delighted by this for 30, 40 years. There is a Charles Schulz Peanuts cartoon where one of the boys, it may be Charlie Brown, it may be Linus, I can't remember.
I think it's Linus.
Is so appalled by something that Lucy says, that he tears his shirt open and then glances down to himself and says, "Good grief, she hath caused me to rend my garment," which I love, but that's the only other usage. Verbs...
Oh, that was biblical, isn't it?
It's extremely biblical. But verbs get attached to cliches, and then they fall out of other use and can only be contained within the cliche. And it is a thing to avoid, because good writing is also all about the verbs.
It's I verb you, man. I totally verb you on this one. I verb you adjectively.
Adjectively, sure.
Adjectively. Well, I don't know. Adjectively.
Adjectively.
Okay. No.
I'm going to go with him on that one, but I'm also going to say it does have to do a slight thing for nouns. What is a harbinger?
You mean a harbinger?
Of doom, largely.
Yes. Right. But
a harbinger is one who stands up and pre-sells, we are all going to die. For instance, Dave, riding with me in a car is often a harbinger.
No, a harbinger is
He's not often right.
The subaltern or lower level or officer or higher level non-commissioned officer you send into the town to secure lodgings for yourself and your fellow officers.
Is that right?
Yeah. No.
I did not know that.
If you scout, pioneer, and harbinger are very specific military terms, and when you have a town in front of you, the harbinger goes in and procures the best place for the best officers.
Right.
Which is why it's always a harbinger of doom, because if a harbinger shows up, there's an army behind it.
Right.
I don't know. Once
there's no other kind of harbinger.
A harbinger of good.
I'll have you know, I sat on a rock once wearing bat wings and a scorpion tail, and
You totally felt like a harbinger.
And I employed a young adventurer coming by, and I said, I want you to be my harbinger. I want you to proclaim my coming and my domination, and the fact, spread the word of the gloriousness of me. And she became my harbinger forever.
Certainly. But Doom followed in her
Casey
trail.
Lancaster, fabulous woman, amazing artist, but she was a brilliant harbinger of my demonic glory.
Yeah, the only other one is pussy willows are the harbinger of spring.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, crocuses. Crocuses are a harbinger of spring.
Other things.
Except for saffron crocuses, which are about to bloom.
I always took it as a herald then. So harbinger is more of the herald of, lo, springeth falling.
Yes.
Except for heralds say something's going to happen. Harbingers just sort of show up and start flying things out. But anyway.
If we're talking about military terms that have become
Batman.
cliches, can I introduce you to the Forlorn Hope?
Yes. Well, I know what it is, but sure.
Of course you do. I've probably talked about it before.
No. We watched we watched Sean Bean faithfully through the Sharp's Rifles, so we are very familiar with the Forlorn Hope.
But it predates that.
The Forlorn Hope, or we discussed.
David Drake. I just got to meet him. Hello, David Drake. If you ever hear this, you are awesome, and I love your Hubbard tanks.
Originally a Landsknecht thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So what?
Landsknecht.
Hey, Landsknecht. Hey, Landsknecht. They bin ich nicht aber Krieg und Schreck. Yeah, those guys.
Oh, don't stop. So Forlorn Hope. For those who don't know, apparently I'm sat at a table full of those who do, which is always dull.
That's what we are.
But Forlorn Hope is only peripherally associated with forlorn and not at all with hope, because it comes from the Dutch verloren hoop.
I didn't know the linguistic origin.
Oh, did you not?
It was Dutch.
I did not.
This is absolutely where it comes from. The verloren hoop is the lost troop, literally. Mm-hmm. And they are the first soldiers through the breach in the wall.
That part I knew.
Because they're almost certainly going to die.
Right.
And they are volunteers because their life is just in such extreme...
Voluntold?
Yes.
Yeah.
If they survive, they get mightily rewarded, but mostly they don't. So there's this beautiful linguistic shift. You go from verloren hoop to every Dutch person out there is going to criticise my pronunciation, and I don't care. To forlorn hope because they sound so alike, and the meanings feel as though they are alike, and they're really not.
I could see that.
Well, beautifully enough, because looking at it,
yes.
They're known as. And everyone's going to hate this, the enfants perdus, the damn children in the French, because the French
lost. The lost children.
The lost
boys. As a French girl, I gotta. Sorry.
I don't speak the language. Obviously.
We do.
Come on, think of it as pain perdu. Lost. No.
Anyway, and the other fascinating thing is it's hope in English because it sounded like hope. It actually is closer to heap.
Well, you said herp, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yet another military example.
Yes.
Hoist by his own petard.
Petard.
Yes.
Has anybody seen a petard?
Yes. I've made a petard.
Bless you. What is a petard, John?
A petard is a bomb. It's a satchel charge in modern parlance.
It's essentially a landmine.
Yes. And it was
I really didn't know this.
A primitive landmine, essentially made out of a jar.
Let's go back to the fart.
So it's a jar loaded with gunpowder.
Okay.
Right.
Petard is French, right?
Certainly.
Or I don't know.
It sounds terribly French.
It does.
It's low French. Let's go on.
And it could be a box, but you put it in a sack.
Yeah.
And you ran it up to a fortification, set it against the wall, and lit it and ran away. So it was the original satchel charge.
Sure.
And Shakespeare used it for the kind of fool who runs up, lights the fuse, and then hesitates because he doesn't want to run back out into the
gunfire from
in
above.
the struck zone. Yes, exactly.
Right.
And then you're hoist. You are raised under the heavens.
I love that.
So it's sort of the opposite of Gavroche, really, who then ran under and picking up bullets to get shot in The Tale of Two Cities.
Yes.
Not really hoisted.
But the root of it is from péter, to fart.
Okay. Le pétamine. Do you know about Le Petit Man?
No.
Le Petit Man was a vaudeville performer.
Oh yes, of course.
Who farted. And musically, and obviously lit his farts at the end for a dramatic conclusion. But mostly he farted musically.
Now you all understand that means that J.P. Le Petit Man from Blazing Saddles was a fart joke that very few people got.
Yes, of course it was.
Which I didn't, and now I do. Thank you so much.
I remember that, but was that the campfire scene?
No, Le Petit Man was the name of the bureaucrat that was sending the black sheriff to the
there was also the
town.
Campfire scene, but...
Yeah,
there was a campfire
that was another fact.
That was
the entire thing was a set of fart jokes. Yes.
So the most obvious
Mel
petard
Brooks liked his fart jokes.
all of our listeners have probably seen is in the movie, as the second Lord of the Rings movie that Peter Jackson did when the orc runs into the tower, runs into the tunnel outside of Helm's Deep and blows up.
That's true.
Yeah.
That technically is a fart joke.
And there we go.
And I'm sure that Peter got that, actually.
I'm sure
Thanks,
he did.
Peter.
Now, going all the way back to the original point, this has become a cliche because it is so embedded in our consciousness, in part because Shakespeare launched it so hard. I mean, it really sticks, but in part because everyone imitated him. So going back to your thing, all of these started as a moment of genius.
Yes.
And have been worn down
Yes.
into a babble of idiocy.
Yes. Mm-hmm. All of these things. Yes. I mean, they lose their own meaning completely. As witness, I have lived 60 years with the phrase hoist by his own petard, and I have never even bothered to find out what a petard is or how you get hoisted by it, because I had always assumed it would be some sort of physical hook. Or...
blown through the air.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By a fart.
And they make perfect sense once you're...
Sure.
So, I mean, I think we're in the business right now of creating a whole bunch of new cliches.
What we need is some new cliches.
Well, there's a lot of technologies that are quickly becoming obsolete that a lot of people don't know what they are, but they still use the phrase.
Sure.
If I call you on my own dime,
okay,
that's nigh meaningless to a millennial or
an Englishman.
Well, no, because you were around. Don't be obtuse.
But
it's from the payphone era when there were payphones, and two,
people used
phone cost.
Then you could drop a dime on someone.
That's the one where I was getting confused because Karen, my wife, who is blessedly American, had to explain dropping a dime on someone.
But now we're talking about the transience of slang, basically.
Yep.
Tuppence more and up goes the donkey. Now, of course, every Pratchett reader knows that one. But otherwise, you had to be an English Victorian person, and he also used beggars and thieves' cants in his books.
Sure.
Fascinating.
Right. But that's one of the sources of cliches, clearly, so...
A good writer.
Well...
And or slang.
No,
a good writer making use of slang.
No, I mean obsolescence.
Oh, sure.
Obsolete slang.
Sure. Yeah.
I suppose there's the gig. Can you take obsolete slang and make it funny?
Yes.
I think you can. And in which case it's sort of that's the joke between you and the reader. I'm making a tremendously funny joke, and if you're smart enough, you'll get it.
Yeah.
And
except that these days you don't actually have to be smart. You just have to know how to Google.
Right. Well, you have to know that there's something to look for, though.
Some people, that's what I mean, but you have to know that there's something to Google. Like, I'm the queen of all Googling, and I live to look shit up, but it's still kind of funny. They're like, how does that work? And okay, what is that really?
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to undermine us for a moment. There's something that I have to call an anti-cliche. And for me, it's a lot in the works of Terry Pratchett, because when you dive into one of his stories, you'll look at something and suddenly discover, just like petard is a fart joke, which you didn't know. For instance, in Small Gods, they are torturing one of the characters on the back of a brass turtle, which is a clear echo of Parallos of Athens being roasted in a bowl he made for someone else to execute people, which I didn't know until much later.
Okay.
That it's a historical source echoed forward.
Well, echoed sideways because it's pure fantasy, but...
To call Terry Pratchett pure fantasy is a fight I would love to undertake, not in this podcast.
Woohoo! Another podcast. Make a note, Jeannie.
yes.
Yeah, with regard to that, it is absolutely true that I had to do far more research for my fantasies than I ever did for my contemporary novels. There is so much. This is leaving the point entirely.
That's what we do.
I know, isn't it lovely? While I was sitting down to write my first fantasy, which was set in an analogue of the Holy Land after the First Crusade, and I had a teenage girl being carried in a litter by 8 strong men across a desert landscape. And the thing is, mostly I wrote crime novels, and I knew how to get from Newcastle to Berwick-upon-Tweed. I knew how long it took by train or by road or by bus. I had no idea how far 8 strong men could carry a teenage girl in a litter across a semi-desert landscape. And blessedly, these were the early days of the internet. So I went onto the internet and I said, does anybody know? And fans are lovely. There were these blokes, and they built a litter, and they tossed one of their daughters into it, and they carried her around a field for an hour, and then they multiplied up. And we decided the 15 miles was fair. And anything more than that was asking a bit much, really.
Yeah. Well, I have kind of an engineering approach to it.
Yeah.
I would probably come up with about the same answer.
Yeah.
It's like...
I would go longer if they were sousaphone players.
Very few.
I was just saying,
I would wager that
none of the volunteers have ever...
not in his novel. I would bet money that there was not a single sousaphone player in that novel. Would I be right?
Yes, you would. Money is yours.
Well, I was, this took me to the how long could they actually do it? Well, are you used to carrying one or not used to carrying one? Because it's like CU marching band, the first day of band camp, when the first time a sousaphone is on your shoulder for 6 hours at a time, and your shoulder feels like raw hamburger meat, and you hate everything and everyone.
Okay.
And by the end of the season, you've gone another 15 miles, and you could go another 15 more if you needed to, because you're now used to the weight of a sousaphone on your shoulder.
Sure.
And I would submit to you that a palanquin of a teenage girl between 8 people is actually less than a sousaphone.
Oh, wait. Yeah.
It almost certainly is.
Because I'm sure they don't construct them of oak or ironwood, but rather thinking
let's
bamboo.
Just say the palanquin plus the girl weighs a nice round 200 pounds. Well, let's make it 240.
Let's
that way it's
300.
300?
She gets curtains.
She does have curtains.
All right,
curtains are explicit.
All right.
And we do have to toss a second girl in there at one point.
Make it 320 then, so it's nicely divisible by 8. Then that's 40 pounds apiece, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
How far can you carry 40 pounds?
Through a semi-desert landscape.
Through a semi-desert landscape with sufficient water?
Because you have to carry UN water.
Okay.
And that's what I was saying. If they are pros, it is different than I am a bunch of,
Yeah.
True.
I read an account once of what it took to get into the British SAS, the Special Air Services, which is essentially the elite British Navy SEAL /
We're proud of them.
Green Beret. So these guys, just to get in, have to carry like a full pack, which is 100 pounds or something, and run. I can't remember where or what, but it's several miles. In like a competitive time. What would be, I certainly couldn't do it unencumbered.
No.
It's unlikely I could finish the course
I believe they still call that yomping.
Yeah.
I don't know why they call it yomping, but they do.
Yeah. But so, and then I read about the mission these guys went on, and they basically carried about 200 pounds of equipment apiece.
Each? Jesus.
Yes. Some of them didn't weigh 200 pounds, but they got off the helicopter with 200 pounds of equipment each and humped that. That's the American Army term. Humped the gear because they had to take everything with them, right? They had
all
to
your
take
water for the next few days,
all their ammunition, across the desert to several miles, whatever. So,
There was a famous.
So those guys could hump that girl across the desert. For quite a ways.
There was a famous act of piracy that I just wanted to throw out there. Ranulph was really pissed off about the Sultanate, and so he taught a bunch of guys how to sail on the Dead Sea because they weren't sailors, but you can't sink because it's so saline. Then they took their boats apart, portaged them 200 miles over the desert so that they could ravage up and down the coast. They got to Medina, didn't quite get to Mecca, but it still scared the crap out of the whole Ottoman Empire. So Suleiman was quite pissed. So, what you can do when you practice and do regularly versus... So I suppose there's assumption of competence when you are writing to...
So really, the answer can be whatever you want it to be. They can be complete neophytes, or they can be, super soldiers. Which
I hired them straight out of prison, so they're going to be good for 10 miles, and then they're going to want to lie around.
Yes.
So,
at this point, I suppose I ought probably to confess, in the hope that 8 strong men aren't listening to this, that I didn't actually use the measurement in the book after all.
I would like to say that if they want to carry me around the lake at Penzik, I will let them find out how far they can carry I don't know what they'll make it out of, but I like 300, it's a round number, That'll be me, my glass of wine, my grapes, my book of poetry.
Glass, tome, but you're not that heavy. And curtains, because you must have curtains. Lacy.
Gently wafting curtains.
Curtains don't weigh anything compared to the rest of the rig.
Quickly.
Tapestry curtains weigh.
Slowly.
Yes, I suppose. But
very.
Nobody said anything about tapestry curtains. You want the breeze.
These are actually the adverbs that I have to go through when I finish something, and I do a search on each one of them to find out did I use
actually?
It. I actually do. I discovered
read of people doing this.
Quickly and slightly is one of the things. I finished writing it. I've got 309 pages worth of joy here. Yeah. I've been known to go search on how many times did I use the word very, and then I take it out. And
all of them.
I actually take all of them out because then I can go back and put some in, but I allow myself no more than 5.
Get back to our theme.
Guys,
no, but it's still
arbitrary number.
But it's still the cliches can be adverbs. He smiled slightly.
Yeah, though I would like to contend that the notion that you don't need adverbs, that adverbs are always supererogatory, is a cliche in itself.
Okay.
And it is one that is taught by pretty much every MFA or creative writing MA in the UK.
But is it...
I used to teach on a creative writing MA in the UK, and I was the course heretic because everybody else,
of course you were, and proud to know you.
Clung to the agenda. Less is more. Which is it is the absolute cliche of all writing programs ever. And I would say, sometimes, guys, less is just less.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. Me and Jane Austen like long sentences, so I would argue that with you. But here's the thing: is when you find that you're using this, you're leaning on it.
Yeah, sure.
Leaning on that's right. Leaning on the word that I use slightly is one of my bad ones too. Of I smile slightly. Slightly.
But to Chaz's point, that's just you're talking a matter of style when you're talking about creative writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So and
everything is a matter of style. He contended.
Yes, but
she titted boobily down the stairs.
This isn't actually a quotation, is it?
I'm afraid so.
Tell me it's Tim Minchin.
I don't remember, but it was another one of those. I mean, you guys were talking last week. You guys remember you were talking last week about the worst entries to novels?
Oh, Bulwer Lytton.
Bulwer Lytton, yes, indeed.
The W is silent.
Oh, my God.
Wasn't there something about breasts coming into the room? Do you remember? Can you?
Oh, God. Olivia followed her breasts into my office where I was studying the dead flies on the windowsill and dropped a large brown envelope on my desk, which rearranged the dust as it came to rest next to my right elbow, causing me to lose interest in the flies as I watched her walk away, watched carefully while wondering if the motion of her hips could bring a dead man back to life, which led to wondering what she could do to a man who was still alive.
It made me wonder what she could do to the flies. Did the flies come back to life?
Will Dennehy, Cambridge.
Is she like the lady of the flies?
Mentioned crime detective.
I love that he got dishonorable mention.
I like dishonorable. It makes me want to go for dishonorable mention.
Yep.
Yes.
Anyway, so...
bringing the whole dead man back to life, the whole,
Is that a cliche?
Yeah, a little bit. More than a little.
Noir cliche.
No, really, it's she had a, body that had spoke of promises.
Good noir actually kind of threw the cliches away and turned it on its head. I remember an image from Raymond Chandler, the Philip Marlowe's
That's practically the foundation of noir.
Right, exactly.
It's not throwing anything away because there wasn't anything yet, except for Dashiell Hammett.
But writing cliches in general, though, he at one point describes a guy who walks into the room or something, and his tie looked like it had been tied with a pliers, which is a great image. I mean, you just see this tiny little knot, right? So.
See, weirdly, that wasn't where I went at all.
Uh-huh.
When you say a tie tied with pliers, I thought didn't use his hands, and so it was very messy and askew.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I would just view it as
engineering.
It was funny that I went to think, well, it's like hard enough with fingers, let alone with just pliers, because then you. Yeah, makes you think, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Well, I think in context it was more
tight.
Well, yes, but I'm not sure. That's just the impression that left me with.
Yeah. This is what good writing does. It causes arguments across microphones.
Yes. Well, that's what we need is, more men walking through with well-filled trousers.
I'm sorry, who mentioned trousers?
Cliche.
I'm just talking about cliches. There have been so many cliches of women's breasts and hips, and it's like, I think we should talk more about packages and baskets.
Fine with me.
Right?
Oh, go ahead.
Or
we could do the other thing and just not objectify anybody's person.
Oh, well. But then Jason Momoa wandered into the room, and I couldn't hear you over the sound of a wet Jason Momoa coming out of the water. As a matter of fact, I don't know anything that was said to me for about 4 months before Aquaman came out because wet Jason Momoa.
Mm-hmm. Farewell, my lovely Raymond Chandler. Mm-hmm. His hat was at least 2 sizes too small and had been perspired in freely by someone. It fitted better than it fitted him. He worried about where a house wears a windbane. A tie had apparently been tied with a pair of pliers in a knot the size of a pea.
There you go.
Well, there you go. Yeah. I don't know. I still kind of saw askew with a...
Yeah, we take your point.
Yeah.
Yes.
It will be very difficult to tie a tie.
Well, I was just thinking,
even one pair of pliers, let alone 2.
When you're using these cliches, are you then presuming that you were only writing for an English-speaking audience?
Well,
yes.
First
I
language.
write in English.
Well, no, but that's what I mean by, is it their first language? Or because we have friends in the Ukraine over at Arm Street. Hi, Arm Street, who occasionally so what does this mean? Of course we're going to. What does that mean precisely? How do they?
Yeah, sure. But I confess, if this is a confession, I do, insofar as I write for anybody, because mostly I write for myself, I think. But certainly I write for an audience whom I assume will understand what I'm doing.
Yep.
I'm not going to...
Now, from the perspective of technical writing, you have to consider your audience. It gets sliced a little more finely, right?
Sure.
Because are you talking to somebody with a specific technical knowledge, or are you talking to a newbie, or are you talking to whatever? But
but you can't cover all of those in the same text.
No, you don't. But that's why you analyze your audience. Right. But you do the same thing, even unconsciously, maybe, as writing anything. Well, if you're writing fiction, and you're writing jokes, you expect somebody to get the joke. You expect them to have the background to get the joke, right? And if that means a certain familiarity with English, that's what you have to assume.
Having said that, I have been known to put jokes in the total confidence they'll be completely overlooked. I like, for example, the Crusader Fantasy again. There is a character in there called Marron, Marron, which, as you will know, is French for chestnuts.
Yes.
And he is on various occasions marron glacé, because he's really cold, and he's sweet chestnut because he's being adorable, and so on and so forth. All those jokes are in there, but they are for me.
Right. Well, and you're considering your audience. Your audience is you.
It's true. I'm very careful.
But there's also the possibility that you don't have to write down to people. You can assume things like William Goldman, The Princess Bride.
Yes.
I didn't mean it, sobbed. Sorry about that, sobbed. Sobbed Buttercup, not a single syllabub. Wesley knew that a syllabub was a drink made with tea and jam, but he also knew an apology when he heard one.
That's very nice. I have to say, syllabub is not made with tea and jam.
But it sort of gave a nod to,
totally.
Well, and similarly, Lemony Snicket for the kids' books. They go ahead and use the words. They're puttanesca, which means with very few ingredients.
Okay. Sure it does.
Yes. But it just describes it because a kid who's never made a puttanesca sauce is now aware that puttanesca is something, red, involves tomatoes, and goes on pasta.
Yes.
There you go. There's something they might have learned a whole new word just by reading a Lemony Snicket book. And how awesome is that?
As an adult, they can learn the origin of the word, which is a whole nother level of joke.
It means not very many ingredients, but definitely capers.
And at another level, you know where the word puttanesca comes from.
Where does it come from?
It comes from the Italian puta, or whore, because whores are notoriously...
cheap?
Yeah, well...
don't have much in the cupboard.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, there you go. My whore pasta sauce.
Yes.
Yep.
Farts and whores, my
Farts
God.
and whores. We've now covered the gamut here. So I think basically we probably better put a wrap on this and say that we'll put a link to stories and these fascinating jokes that we told on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Wait.
You can't find us anywhere. We're going to hide. What do you say?
It was a dark and stormy night. The rain fell in torrents outside the Breast Western, the country-themed strip club, where the exotic dance duo of Stormy and Dark rattled the house, for it was a Tuesday, and fiercely agitated the lustful flames of the patrons who struggled in the darkness to rearrange their Wranglers. Go to J. Scott, Hollywood, California. Dishonorable mention, dark and stormy. Bowler Lytton, thank you.
I got nothing after that. This is a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to Michael Ingberg and Many Hats Music. Thanks to Jackal Designs, Jasmine McLeod. Buy our stuff. That'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks.